surprisingly sore throat for the last 8 days now, and to be honest, it's still there. But 4 or 5 days ago, it really wasn't up to whispering whatsoever. It kind of hurt to talk, but I'm going to fight through. And tonight, we're back on our favourite Reddit page, No Sleep. So, going to be a nice long one, whispering through some of the top rated scary stories from the last month. And hopefully you enjoy. So, without further ado, let's get into story number 1. Now this is one of the highest rated stories. It's got top awards and stuff. 12,000 upvotes. And it's titled, I Died for 6 Minutes in 2003. Heaven isn't what we think it is. With apologies to the religious, I feel my story must be shared. In 2003, when I was 15 years old, my heart stopped for 6 minutes. It happened on an ordinary afternoon at the point in my daily routine when I walked home from the bus stop. In the 4 blocks between the corner where I hopped off the bus and my front door, I started to feel nauseous. It came on suddenly without warning. I'd felt just fine all day, ate a lunch of Bosco sticks and marinara sauce, something I'd eaten hundreds of times throughout high school. Before I had an opportunity to consider alternative causes, I broke out in a cold sweat. Then I felt a curious flutter in my chest. My heart slipped into what I later learned was an episode of ventricular fibrillation. I became breathless and collapsed. What happened next has been told to me after the fact. I apparently sprawled in the road where a woman driving a hatchback nearly crushed my skull between her tyres. Instead, she screeched to a halt, tried to arouse me, then dialed emergency services when she failed to do so. EMS arrived to discover my heart had stopped beating. I was dead, technically. They transported my body to the hospital and somewhere along the way managed to shock my ticker back to life. Thus began a harrowing weeks-long journey through the American healthcare system that led eventually to an ablation, pacemaker, and mountains of debt my family's still dealing with. But my heart's alright. And thank goodness it is, because what I learned that day has taught me never to thank God for anything. Because for those 6 minutes, as my lifeless body travelled across the city accompanied by 2 paramedics working tirelessly to revive me, my soul transcended our world to visit the hereafter. During my visit, I learned things about our universe that I wish I hadn't. Perhaps in sharing my story, I might help our species prepare for what comes after we expire. It began with light, blinding white, pervasive. It bathed me, calmed me. It was everything they tell you about. Beatific, welcoming. The stuff of spiritual experiences. I had the distinct feeling of ascent, like the light was lifting me skyward. I passed through several sets of gates which my dizzied consciousness hardly registered. Upon reflection, I don't believe they were physical in any sense, and yet I recall the feeling of admittance, as if they might have prevented me from rising had they remained closed. In any event, I arrived in a place without dimension, a place beyond reality. It only made sense while I occupied it. I don't believe a corporeal being can make sense of the astral plane. Something about its intangible existence defies translation. So what I came away with were more impressions than images. I was not Several life forces enclosed me upon my arrival. At first, because of my Christian upbringing, I believed them to be angels. In my incorporeal form, I made the spiritually equivalent gesture of opening my arms, anticipating their embrace. Instead, I felt myself shackled by their powers like a collared dog. Humiliation and terror came over me. These were not the ethereal beings I'd been led to believe await us. These were cruel, unsympathetic overlords by whom I was fettered. Why? I thought, my soul wailing like a petulant child. Something like laughter returned, but it was cold, mocking. Thoughts floated into my consciousness like birds winging in and out of sight. They delivered some horrifying truths about existence that I'll do my best to relay to you now. Our universe, like many others running parallel to it, contains a pittance of the total energy in existence. It is a farm used to produce souls, which only arise in the precise conditions found in our cosmos. When you hear scientists talk about the improbability of the existence of our Goldilocks universe, it's because they don't actually come into being spontaneously. They're designed, and the hands that craft them are not benevolent gods, but rapacious beings with little care for the creatures they create. Our ultimate purpose, I learned in the custody of the spirits that shackled me, was to ripen until we were ready to serve them on their higher plane. The Big Bang gave birth to the universe to give rise to life to eventuate in humanity, a sufficiently conscious organism that may be harvested for use as slaves on a higher plane, where time and space dissolve into an eternity we spend in servitude. 6 minutes in, heaven felt like a lifetime, which I spent amusing what I perceived to be a childlike spirit with a penchant for psychologically distressing manipulation. It battered me around like a cat with a caught mouse, reveling in the pain it produced. Physical discomforts we imagine hell inflicting upon us pale in comparison to the torture of soul pain. Loss of a loved one comes closest, that piercing emotional damage resulting from trauma. When it became clear my time had not yet expired on Earth and I was to return, I was told not to reveal their existence to the rest of my kind. My reward, they communicated to me, would be a marginally improved station among the slave population. Alternatively, if I managed to convince others of their existence, new horrors would await me when I returned. I can't imagine anything worse than what I experienced, subsumed beneath an ineffable grief and torment. For weeks I tried to explain to anyone who would listen what I experienced. Everyone told me I'd suffered a very serious and traumatic experience for a young man, that the event left scars on my psyche as well as my heart. I gave up trying to convince them. I slowly began to convince myself that what they told me was true. I'd simply imagined it, a death dream as it were, the mind reckoning with its own imminent demise, trying to make sense of the experience. Then I met someone who claimed to have met God. This was a few years later, when the author of a non-fiction book recounting their near-death experience visited my hometown. I won't reveal the author's name as I don't want to invite a lawsuit, which I'm sure he'd launch against me if he read that I had besmirched him. I attended a reading and afterward confronted him about his tale. I looked him in the eye and asked if he really met God, something I'm sure he's dealt with 100 times. He smiled and nodded, assuring me that yes, God is real and is filled with love. On a lark, I decided to tell him that I knew the truth, that slavery awaits us all. A flicker in his gaze betrayed his knowledge of the fact he really had died and visited the afterlife, but lied about it in his book because he knew the truth of heaven, the horrible place our souls are bound for. Damn. I mean, that's not necessarily a scary story as much as it is existential crisis inducing. Rather depressing if that's what happens when we die. The top comment is, can't even look forward to death anymore. Okay, lovely. Moving on. Our second story is titled, My Sister's Ex-Boyfriend Keeps Showing Up at Family Events. She's been dead for 2 years. When my sister Lisa died 2 years ago, our family changed forever. We weren't perfect before, who is, but Lisa's death fractured us. My dad barely speaks anymore, my mum busies herself with every charity event she can find, and I've been stuck, angry and looking for somebody to blame. Lisa was the glue that held us together. She was warm, outgoing, always laughing, the kind of person people gravitate to. She loved hiking, photography and the outdoors. Her death, officially ruled an accident, was almost poetic. She slipped while hiking and fell into a ravine. At least that's what the police report said. But if that's true, why does it feel like her ghost never left? Lisa's ex-boyfriend, Matt, was never part of our family. He and Lisa dated for about a year before she broke it off. She said he was controlling, obsessive, constantly texting, showing up unannounced, making passive-aggressive comments when she spent time with her friends. I remember her joking about it once, calling him my stage 5 clinger. But it wasn't funny. Not really. After the breakup, Matt didn't take it well. He kept texting her, leaving voicemails, even sending her flowers at work. She brushed it off, said he'd get bored eventually. I thought she was right, until the funeral. Matt didn't come to the service, thank God, but a week later he showed up on our doorstep. It was a rainy Thursday. My mum opened the door and there he was holding a bouquet of lilies, Lisa's favourite. I just wanted to pay my respects, he said. His voice was soft, his head tilted like he was trying to look vulnerable. My mum, who has never been good at saying no, let him in. Matt sat on our couch, talking about Lisa as if he knew her better than we did. He described her laugh, her smile, the way she always ordered pancakes with extra syrup. My dad stayed silent, his jaw tight. When Matt finally left, I asked my mum why she let him in. He's grieving too, she said. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Matt wasn't grieving. He was lurking. Over the next few months, Matt kept appearing. He showed up at family barbecues, holiday dinners, even my dad's birthday party. Always uninvited, always with some excuse. Your mum said it was okay, he'd claim, or I thought Lisa would have wanted me here. My parents, blinded by their own grief, let it slide. He's harmless, my mum said, he just misses her. But it wasn't harmless, not when he started asking questions. Last Christmas, Matt cornered me in the kitchen. She was different with me, you know, he said, leaning against the counter. I stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? He smiled, that thin, unsettling smile I'd seen so many times. She told me things she wouldn't tell anyone else. Like what? His smile widened, like how she wasn't scared to die. That night I went through Lisa's journals. She was the type to write everything down. Her thoughts, her plans, even little grocery lists. Most of it was normal Lisa stuff. Song lyrics, doodles, random observations. But then I found the entry. I think Matt's been following me. He won't stop texting. Keeps saying he knows something I don't. I'm starting to feel like I can't shake him. I showed it to my mum, expecting her to finally see reason, but she waved it off. Lisa was dramatic sometimes, she said. I'm sure it's nothing. A few days later, I saw Matt's car parked down the street. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed it before, idling near the corner, but I convinced myself it was a coincidence. This time, though, I knew. He wasn't watching our family. He was watching me. Last week was my dad's birthday. Matt showed up holding a gift he claimed Lisa would have bought. A coffee table book about hiking trails. I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him outside away from my parents. What the hell are you doing here? I snapped. His smile didn't falter. Paying my respects, he said. Lisa broke up with you. She wanted nothing to do with you. Why can't you let her go? His eyes darkened. She told you that? Yes. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. She told me a lot of things too. Things she didn't tell anyone else. Then he said something I'll never forget. I was there, you know, on the trail. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. What? He smiled again, a cold, empty thing. She didn't fall. She looked me in the eyes and asked me to let her go. My stomach churned. You're lying. He tilted his head, studying me. Am I? Ask yourself this. If she slipped, why didn't she scream? I called the police that night. I told them everything. The stalking, the journal, his confession. When they went to his apartment the next morning, it was empty. No furniture, no clothes, no sign he'd ever lived there. It's been a week now. I haven't told my parents what he said. I don't know if they'd believe me. Every night, I double-check the locks. Every night I sit in my bed, clutching my phone, too scared to sleep. Last night I finally decided to look through Lisa's journals again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I missed something. Maybe I was looking for answers. But this time there was something new. The last page, which had been blank before, now had a single sentence scrawled across it in jagged black ink. He's not watching. He's inside. Damn. That's pretty good. Very creepy. It's always so frustrating when people don't believe you, but I guess you can attribute it down, like the parents not believing, down to their grief. Yeah, I enjoyed that one. That was good. Story number 3 in tonight's video is titled, I found my missing brother on a forum for the dead. I never thought much about online forums until one of them brought my brother back. Ryan had been missing for 2 years. One day he went out to grab coffee and never came back. No suspicious activity on his bank account. No weird phone calls, no sign of struggle. Just gone. The police said he'd likely been abducted, but without evidence, they couldn't do much. My family family fell apart. My mum stopped eating, my dad stopped talking, and I just stopped feeling. Late one night, while spiralling through forums about unsolved disappearances, I stumbled upon a thread titled Messages from Beyond, Connecting with the Lost. It was buried deep within an obscure corner of the internet, and full of people claiming to receive messages from the dead. It sounded ridiculous, but one comment caught my attention. A user named Echoing Void posted, "Sometimes the missing don't know they're gone. Sometimes they're here looking for home." Below, someone replied, "How do you know?" And Void answered, "Because I am one." For whatever reason, grief, desperation, or lack of sleep, I created an account and messaged Void. I typed, "If you're really one of the missing, prove it. Tell me something only you would know." The response came within minutes. "What do you want me to prove? That you once broke Ryan's nose during a stupid fight over a game of Mario Kart? That he forgave you before you forgave yourself?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anybody about that, not even my parents. It was just one of those childhood moments you carry like a secret scar. I asked, "Who are you?" Void's reply, "I think you know." The next few weeks were a blur. I spent hours every night talking to Void. He said the world he was in was a fractured reflection of ours, familiar but empty. The sky was always grey, the streets abandoned, the air heavy with silence. He couldn't explain how he got there, only that he woke up in this place and couldn't leave. The more we talked, the more he sounded like Ryan. He even remembered details no one else possibly could, like the nickname he used to call our childhood dog, or how he'd secretly taped my embarrassing middle school dance recital to blackmail me later. One night, Void said something that terrified me. He typed, "They're watching me now. They don't like that I'm talking to you." I asked who they were, but his responses became cryptic. "The shadows, the ones who keep us here. They don't like noise." That was the last I heard from him for weeks. Then a new message appeared in my inbox. "Do you want to see me?" Attached was a link to a live video feed. I hesitated but clicked. The stream showed a dimly lit street that looked eerily like the one Ryan and I grew up on. The houses were distorted, their shapes wavering as if viewed through heat haze. In the distance, a figure walked toward the camera. As they drew closer, I recognized his face. It was Ryan. But something was off. His eyes were too wide, his movements stiff, like a puppet on strings. He smiled at the camera, but it wasn't a smile I remembered. It was forced, unnatural. He raised a hand and waved. In the live chat beside the video, he typed, "It's me. I told you I was here." I couldn't move. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Suddenly, the camera shook violently. The shadows behind Ryan began to shift and ripple, forming towering figures with jagged edges. They moved closer, their distorted limbs reaching for him. Ryan typed, "They're coming, you have to help me. Find the door." The feed cut out. I spent the next few days piecing together everything he'd said about his world, looking for clues about the door. It wasn't much, but he'd mentioned a specific place from our childhood, an old abandoned cabin in the woods where we used to play. I drove there half expecting nothing. The cabin was just as we'd left it, rotting and overgrown. Inside I found a trapdoor beneath a threadbare rug. shadow led to a tunnel that stretched on for what felt like miles. At the end was a heavy iron door with strange carvings. As I touched it, my phone buzzed. A message from Void. They know you're here. Don't let them in. Before I could reply, the shadows began to seep through the walls, crawling toward me like living tar. I shoved the door open and stepped through. I don't know how to explain what happened next. One moment I was in the tunnel, the next I was standing in the grey, empty world Ryan had described. The air was heavy, the silence deafening, and there he was, standing a few feet away, staring at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Ryan," I whispered. But before he could respond, the shadow surged forward. The last thing I remember is his scream. I woke up in my bed the next morning, clutching a piece of paper I'd never seen before. Written on it in Ryan's handwriting were the words, "Don't stop looking. There's another door." Damn. I feel like that story feels kind of like incomplete. Like, I wonder if they've posted a part 2. Is this it? They have. Okay, we're gonna continue with that now. I woke up drenched in sweat, clutching the note with trembling fingers. "Don't stop looking, there's another door." But something about it didn't feel right. The handwriting was Ryan's at least. I thought it was, but the words carried an undercurrent of menace, as if written by someone who knew too much. The shadows in my room stretched unnaturally, curling like fingers around the corners. I tried to shake off the unease, but the silence was too loud, the air too still. I stared at the note again, my mind racing. Why would Ryan leave a note instead of explaining himself when I'd found him? Why didn't he come back with me? That night I dreamed of the grey world again. I was back on the empty street, the houses melting into grotesque shapes. Ryan stood in the distance, his figure silhouetted against a flickering, unnatural light. "Ryan," I called, but my voice didn't carry. He turned slowly, his head tilting unnaturally far to the side, like a marionette with its strings pulled wrong. His face was featureless, this time smooth and pale like porcelain, but his body was distorted. His arms were too long and his legs bent at strange angles. When he moved, it wasn't walking, it was gliding, his limbs dragging behind him like dead weight. "Why did you leave me?" his voice echoed in my mind, layered and broken. I stumbled backward, but the shadows surged around me, their jagged forms clawing at my legs. Ryan's face stretched into a grotesque smile, splitting wider and wider until it reached his ears. "Come back," he whispered, his voice now my own. "I'm waiting." I woke up gasping, my throat raw from screaming. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, not with Ryan, but with me. I tried piecing together the timeline of events, but the details didn't add up. The more I thought about Ryan, the more fractured my memories became. His laugh, his voice, the way he looked, it all felt distant, like trying to recall a dream after waking. And then there was this cabin. The trapdoor I'd found didn't exist when we were kids, and we'd explored every inch of that place, so how did I know to look for it? The note burned in my hand and I realised something chilling. The handwriting didn't just look like Ryan's, it looked like mine. Desperate for answers, I returned to the cabin. shadows were thicker this time, pressing against the trees like living tar. The air smelled of rot and the trapdoor felt heavier, colder. I descended the ladder, my flashlight flickering as I moved. The iron door was still there, its carving shifting as if alive. But something was waiting for me. In the dim light I saw him, Ryan, or what was left of him. He was taller now, impossibly tall, his limbs stretched and twisted. His head nearly grazed the ceiling and his face was a black canvas, smooth and featureless except for the faint indent of a smile. "Ryan," I whispered. He stepped forward at the sound of his movements like creaking wood. "You're finally here," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "But you're not supposed to be." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. Ryan's smile stretched wider, splitting his face. "Don't you get it? You're not looking for me. You've never been looking for me." The shadows behind him writhed, taking on familiar shapes I recognized. My friend Mark, my parents, even me. "You don't remember, do you?" Ryan's voice grew darker. "Mark didn't go missing. You killed him." The memory hit me like a freight train. The fight, the argument over nothing, the shove too hard, Mark's body hitting the rocks at the riverbank. "No," I whispered, stumbling back. Ryan laughed, the sound sharp and jagged. "You built this world to hide from the truth, and you built me to punish yourself." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "That's not true, you're lying." "Am I?" Ryan leaned closer, his featureless face inches from mine. "Then why do I look like this? Why do you keep coming back to me?" The shadows surged forward, pulling me to the ground. I screamed, clawing at the dirt, but they were relentless. "Find the door," Ryan mocked, his voice twisting with laughter. "Isn't that what you've been telling yourself?" The iron door creaked open behind him, spilling cold grey light into the tunnel. "This is your last chance," Ryan said, his smile gone. "But know this, every door you open brings you closer to me." The shadows dragged me toward the door, their jagged limbs tearing at my skin. As I crossed the threshold, I heard Ryan's voice one last time. "You can't run from what you are." I woke up in a hospital room, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air. A nurse entered, her face kind but wary. "You've been unconscious for days," she said softly. "Do you remember what happened?" I shook my head, the events blurring together. "Where am I?" She hesitated. "You were found in the woods, screaming about someone named Ryan. But when the police searched your house..." Her voice trailed off and she placed a newspaper on the table beside me. The headline read, "Man found in forest, linked to unsolved disappearance of childhood friend." Beneath it was a photo of me and a grainy, distorted figure standing behind me, its smooth face grinning wide. I reached for the mirror on the bedside table, my hands trembling. When I looked into it, my reflection didn't smile back. Evidently it was some kind of trap. I mean, there are people waiting for a part 3, so we'll have to see if that happens, but that was very well written. This next story, maybe I'll ask depending how long it takes, is titled "I Can't Remember How I Met My Best Friend." Kaylee has been my best friend for as long as I can remember. For me, that's not a figure of speech. I literally can't remember how I met her. can't find any photos of me with her before 3rd grade, so I guess I met her around then. Strangely though, she's not in any of my class photos. I remember her coming over to my house all the time, but I don't ever remember going to hers. These things never struck me as weird until a few days ago, when I really sat down and thought about them. Some things in life you just sort of accept as fact, right? They've gone on so long you don't remember how they started, like how I always put eggs on the top shelf of the fridge, or how I always tuck my blanket under my feet before going to bed. I don't remember how it started. I've always just done it that way as long as I can remember. So how did I meet her? I don't remember. They say if you lose your sight, you don't see pitch black or nothingness, or a void, you just have the absence of sight. That's how it is for me with Kaylee. There's no remnant of a memory, nothing on the tip of my tongue, it just isn't there. A few days ago I asked her about it. Do you remember how we met? What do you mean, she asked, her smile faltering. Well, we met when I was around 8, right? But you went to a different school, so how did we meet? It was at that summer camp, wasn't it, she asked, with the bottle rockets? I don't think so. I'd only gone one summer and I was pretty sure that was the summer after 4th grade. Church then? Which church? Kaylee paused. The one off Main Street with the steeple. Which one? Oh, I'm not sure. You know I'm not religious, she said with a laugh. The one on the corner, or on Elm Street? She paused. Elm, I think. Well, my parents took me to some balls on the corner, I said, so it couldn't have been church. Oh, she said, shrugging. Then I don't know how we met. It was weird. She seemed confused, and yet it almost felt like she was playing the role of a fortune teller, throwing out vague answers and hoping I'd jump in with more details. So you don't remember how we met? I said with finality. I guess I don't. She shook her head, her bleached blonde hair shaking around her face. Isn't that silly? We've been best friends for 10 years and we can't even remember how we met. I wanted to ask her more, but then my roommate got home and my roommate is a bit... What is that word? A bit... persnickety. So we decided to quietly watch a movie in my room to give her some peace. It seemed weird to bring up again. I was probably just overthinking things. That night, however, I couldn't sleep. As Kaylee slept peacefully on the futon in the common area, I lay wide awake in my bed. Why can't I remember? And then a thought occurred to me. Someone else must remember. I went on Facebook and clicked over to our 21 mutual friends. I started scrolling, making a mental list of who was most likely to know. But then a sudden realization hit me. Each of these friends I'd introduced to her. None of these were her friends originally, they were all mine. I squinted at the screen. How does that make sense? Has she really never introduced me to her friends? And now that I thought about it, she was always visiting me at my dorm, making the 2-hour drive. She offered because I was broke and couldn't afford the gas. But maybe there was more to it than that. Why had I never thought about this before? I scrolled back through my Facebook photos to some childhood ones I'd posted. Kaylee was in them sure as day. She looked different. Her hair wasn't bleached then, her face was chubbier, but from the dimples to the sharp chin, it was her. I clicked back on her Facebook page and scrolled, and that's when I realised something. Every single post involved me or one of our 21 mutual friends. I didn't see a single tag by someone I didn't know. Well, that could be her privacy settings, couldn't it? Like her friends who've tagged her have made the post only visible to their friends or mutuals or something. But not a single post. It was like her entire life revolved around me. Like every single event in her life was related to me, directly or indirectly. I gave up on sleep. I got out of bed and walked into the common room, grabbing a Coke from the mini fridge. Kaylee was sleeping soundly on the futon still. I glanced over at her, my heart pounding. Her pale skin was blue in the light from the microwave clock. Muffled music came from my roommate's room. She was still up, with my mind racing and no one else to talk to. I went over. "Can I come in for a second?" I called quietly through the door. As soon as I opened it, I darted inside. "There's something weird about Kaylee." Isabel scoffed. Yeah, duh." "What?" "She's weird, always has been. You just noticing this now?" I frowned at her. "Okay, sorry, that came out really mean, but it's true. She's just weird. I wish she wouldn't come over every weekend. But since you're really good about Ben coming over, I never say anything." "She doesn't come over every weekend," I huffed. "It's been a lot. I mean, she was here homecoming weekend, and those two in October, then Halloween." "She wasn't here Halloween," I protested. "Oh yes, she was," Isabel replied. "Ben and I had to go over to his place because she was here with you." I shook my head. "No, she wasn't here Halloween." We stared at each other. Isabel's irritation melted to confusion. "She wasn't here. I had COVID, remember? But I saw her. When we came back from the Beta Theta Pi party, she was here. I had to go to Ben's place." The room started to tilt around me. I remember being so sick that weekend, in and out of sleep half the day. But she was here, without me knowing. "You must have gotten the weekends confused," I said weakly. "No, I remember it clearly because we were both in our costumes. Do you know how itchy that Harley Quinn wig is?" Kaylee must have let herself in, but why? Now that I thought about it, that weekend there had been some weird stuff. I'd chalked it up to delirium at the time, but I remember not being able to find my phone. My milk was missing from the fridge. I thought it had been Isabel or Ben, but it had been Kaylee. She was here, watching me sleep. I was jolted out of my thoughts by a thump outside, coming from the common room. "Kaylee," I whispered. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, started down the hall. My door creaked open. "She's looking for me." I ran over to the door and locked it. I held a finger to my lips, standing absolutely still, so still I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. The footsteps started back up into the common room and then towards our door. Getting louder. Isabel glanced down, her eyes went wide. "He's right there," Isabel mouthed to me. The footsteps stopped. The door handle made a ratcheting sound as Kaylee tried to turn it. Once, twice, 3 times. "Hayley, are you in there?" I held my breath. "Isabel." I closed my eyes. She'll just go away. She'll think Isabel's asleep and I just stepped out. Isabel's computer is on, but it's dark in here, so we're fine. I took in a slow, quiet breath. We're fine. She's just going back to sleep. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know you're in there. A raspy whisper, unlike anything I'd heard Kaylee say, and it was coming from the crack under the door. I could feel her breath against my ankles. Ugh. Isabel clapped a hand over her mouth. I took a shaking step away from the door. "Let me in," she whispered. Her slim, pale fingers shot through the crack under the door and swept back and forth, quickly, frantically, trying to grab any part of us she could. "Let me in, now." Isabel grabbed her phone off the desk and dialed 911. The fingers retracted and footsteps sounded in the common room. By the time the police got here, Kaylee was gone. It's been 2 days and I haven't heard from Kaylee. I think about her every waking minute. I've barely eaten or slept. I keep replaying that night through my head, wondering what she would have done if I hadn't locked the door. I've done my research though, combed through social media and photo albums and everything. There is no physical evidence that Kaylee existed in my life before a year ago. Because those photos from my childhood, my mum insists I never had a friend named Kaylee. When she dug the old photo albums out of the attic, she wasn't in any of them. Kaylee's face only appeared in the digital scans of the photos I'd posted online. Photos I'd posted in the past year. And those 21 mutual friends, they all met her in the past year too. She'd made an effort to befriend my friends, find them online, but none of the friendships went back more than a year. I'd checked each and every one. And now suddenly I'm having trouble recalling all those memories with her. I can barely remember what she looked like. Blonde hair, pale skin, dimples, I knew that much. But if you show me a lineup of 10 girls with those qualities, I don't think I'd be able to pick her out. Which leads me to the horrifying conclusion. If she ever finds me again, whether that's in days, years, or decades, I won't even know it's her. That was good. That was probably my favourite story of the video so far, for sure. The bit with like the breath coming under the door really got me. That idea is just so creepy. This story is titled, "I thought my wife was losing her mind until I realised it was me." The first time I noticed something was off, it was her laughter. Not the joyful kind, low, halting, like something breaking apart. I'd hear it late at night, always coming from the living room. When I asked her about it, she'd shrug and say she hadn't laughed at all. "Stress, maybe," she offered. "You've been working so much." She wasn't wrong. I'd been pushing myself hard at the firm, burning through 12-hour days. But it wasn't just the laughter. Small things started piling up. Missing books, rearranged furniture, lights left on when I knew I'd turned them off. "Are you reorganising the house?" I asked one evening after noticing our bookshelf looked different. "I haven't touched it," she replied, a flicker of something in her voice. Fear, guilt. I brushed it off. The tipping point came last Tuesday. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. to the sound of scratching. My wife wasn't in bed. I found her in the basement, crouched over the floor, carving something into the concrete with a screwdriver. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. She turned slowly, startled, like she hadn't even realised I was there. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed, her hands trembling. I don't know," she whispered. I pulled her away and brought her back to bed, trying to convince myself it was sleepwalking or stress. But something about her face, the haunted look, like she was afraid of herself, made my skin crawl. The next day I searched the house while she was out. That's when I found the tapes. 12 unmarked VHS tapes, crammed into a shoebox in the attic. The first one I played made my stomach drop. my desk, typing, eating dinner, sleeping. Hours of me, filmed from angles that didn't make sense. Inside my office, my car, our bedroom. On one tape I was sitting on the couch turning my head sharply, as if I'd heard something. The camera panned to the doorway where my wife stood holding the screwdriver from the basement. I confronted her that night. "Why are you recording me?" I shouted, holding up one of the tapes. Her face crumbled, tears spilling over. "Recording you? You've been following me. I found those tapes weeks ago." Her voice broke and she fled the house before I could respond. I stood there dumbfounded, following her. That was insane. But her words gnawed at me. I stayed up all night pacing until curiosity got the better of me. I played the last tape in the box. It was dated the day before. On it I watched myself sitting at the kitchen table, writing in a notebook I didn't recognize. My handwriting filled the pages. I didn't own that notebook. The most recent entry sent chills down my spine. She knows I know. I tore the house apart until I found the notebook stuffed in a drawer beneath the sink. The pages were filled with logs of her movements. 7:30 a.m. leaves for work. 12:15 p.m. comes home for lunch. Doesn't see me watching. I couldn't remember writing any of it. My hands trembled as I flipped to the last page. "Tomorrow she'll leave. Don't stop her." The next morning her side of the closet was empty. She was gone. She'd taken everything except a single piece of paper on the pillow. 4 words were scrawled across it in my handwriting. "Who is watching you?" I searched the house again, every room, every drawer. Then I checked the tapes. All of them were blank. That night, I woke up to the sound of laughter from the living room. Low, halting. My laughter. Damn, I'm not even sure I'm aware what's quite going on in that story. I think it's scary. I mean, it's creepy for sure, but I'm not super sure what's going on. Maybe a doppelganger situation, but yeah, don't quite get that one. Right, and our absolutely final story is this one. I made a deal to escape death, but it's worse than I imagined. When I was 19, I almost died. A car accident left me pinned under the wreckage, my lungs collapsing as metal sliced through my side. I remember the faint sound of sirens, the warmth of blood pooling under me, and the icy grip of fear. But more than anything, I remember the voice. "Do you want to live?" It was deep, reverberating like it came from within me, but no one was there. The voice repeated itself louder this time. "Do you want to live?" Yes, I choked, barely able to whisper. The pain stopped instantly. The sirens faded, replaced by complete silence. And then the voice returned, calm and commanding. "You'll live, but you will never escape me." I woke up in the hospital miraculously unarmed. The doctors couldn't explain it. My injuries had been catastrophic, but by the time I had arrived, there wasn't a scratch on me. They called it divine intervention. I should have felt grateful, but all I felt was dread. For years I tried to forget the voice, convincing myself it was a hallucination brought on by shock. Life went back to normal, or as normal as it could be, with a lingering sense of doom. But on my 30th birthday, it came back. I was blowing out candles when the room went silent. No clinking glasses, no music, just a deafening absence of sound. I froze, gripping the edge of the table, and then I heard it. Time to pay. The voice, the same one from the accident, but this time it sounded closer, like it was standing behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. My friends laughed, oblivious as the world spun around me. I didn't sleep that night. From that moment on, things started happening. Shadows lingered in the corners of my vision, twisting unnaturally. Doors creaked open on their own. Mirrors warped, showing things that shouldn't be there. An extra hand, a face that wasn't mine. Then the whispers started, quiet at first, like static, but they grew louder over time. At night I'd hear my name repeated over and over and over in a low, guttural chant. Last week I woke up to find my reflection staring at me, even though I wasn't standing in front of a mirror. Its lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I smashed it, but when I looked down, my reflection stared up from the shattered pieces. I tried everything, priests, psychics, even therapists, but nothing worked. No one could help me. 2 nights ago I saw it for the first time. A figure, tall and shadowy, standing at the foot of my bed. Its eyes burned red, its face twisted in a permanent grin. I screamed, but it didn't move. It just whispered, "You'll never escape." Last night it got closer. I woke up with its face inches from mine, its cold breath on my skin. It didn't speak, but its grin widened as it raised a single skeletal finger to its lips, silencing me. Now, I'm writing this because I know tonight is the end. I don't know what it wants or why it waited this long, but I can feel it. It's in the room as I type this. To whoever reads this, don't make deals. No matter how desperate you are, death isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Trust me. Nice. Well, that was... Honestly, all of them were very, very well written. I didn't like the breathing under the door bit. I think, yeah, I don't know if any of them, like, properly scared me, but equally, I don't know if it's a case of I have read so many of these now. I've read amazing ones, I've read terrible ones. So I don't know if my, like, standards for what scares me now on this Reddit page, I'm not sure whether my standards have, like, massively gone up. But hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know which story was your favourite, if I will remember, and I really hope that I do. I will put the timestamps in the description so you can pick up where you left off or go to a particular story. Apologies if my, like, mouth was a little more, like, dry or whatnot, like, more, like, mouth soundy, because my throat is still insanely sore. It's really difficult to swallow and whatnot, so I think it's still impacting my ASMR ability, but hopefully it wasn't too noticeable. But yeah, that is going to do it for tonight's video. So if you did enjoy it and you're able to, then please do give this video a like and subscribe if you're new.